Hi everyone, Sara here. Next up is an interview I recorded with John El-Mokadem. I think that's how you pronounce his name. I completely forgot to tell John how to pronounce my name, so you'll hear him refer to me as Sarah, which is absolutely fine because I didn't tell him that my name is Sara. Anyway, John tells us his story with getting to know this understanding of how our human experience works and what that has enabled him to enjoy in his life and in his business. And he also shares a little bit about a research project that he's recently been involved in, looking at people with chronic fatigue syndrome. And he doesn't tell us that much. So it's fantastic that John has actually asked to be part of the group so that anyone watching the video, if you have any questions about that or anything else that John speaks about, you can ask questions and tag him, and he'll happily answer. I've said to John that he's welcome to stay in the group as long as he finds it useful. So, but I'll leave that up to him, and that the same applies to all of you as well. You know, as long as this group is useful to you, please stay. And if there's anything that can enhance your enjoyment of the group or help you to get more out of it, then let me know. This group is growing organically, and I'm getting to know you, you're getting to know me, and I'm here to be of service and support your growth in terms of awakening, if you want to put it like that, and your understanding of how life works and how you're navigating this really wondrous human experience. So yeah, if you have any ideas for how the group could be more useful to you, then just drop me a PM, or do a live stream, or record a video and post it, or write your own post. Whatever you feel comfortable with, I'm here to help. So enjoy John's interview, and like I say, any questions, just pop them in the comments. Okay, bye for now.
Well, hello, everybody. It's nice to kind of meet you virtually. I'm just having the pleasure of meeting Sarah here for the first time as well. And I've been given a kind of loose remit to talk to you a bit about my own journey and how I came to this understanding of the three principles and the work that I do and my own story with it all. And I guess, if there was one thing that I would want to share with people, and in fact, it's the thing that is always on my mind when I work with a client. It was the biggest thing in my own journey was realizing that I am fundamentally okay and that everything is absolutely fine. And I had spent basically my whole life believing that everything was not fundamentally okay, and that I really had to get it right, and I had to make it look a certain way. Um, and I spent years with problems with depression and anxiety, and I had health concerns and all kinds of stuff. And for the longest time, it really looked to me like I needed to navigate my life to make it right and to get it right. And if I didn't, then I would have wasted my life, or it would have been a terrible thing. And that was kind of where I was coming from. And so I spent a long time learning methodologies and practices, and I did NLP. I did I was just telling Sarah I had this period of doing lots of Tony Robbins stuff, and did lots of meditation and went and saw spiritual teachers, and I tried everything basically, and it was just really, really hard work. um, and I always felt like there was something I had to be doing in order to, in order to be okay. Um, and I was trying so hard to navigate my life and to, to make it look like a particular way, to be successful in my work. I had a lot of problems with relationships and trying to reconcile somebody that I was with, and variously getting caught up in my mind that I shouldn't be with them because of all these ideas I'd been told about what a good relationship was, and how what I had was not going to fit that criteria. So I spent a lot of time just struggling with all of these things, trying to get them right. And it was hard work, and I ended up sick. That was about the best I'd managed to create. I hadn't managed to create this perfect life. I actually managed to create sickness. And I had this period where I had chronic fatigue syndrome, and was in hospital at one point for 3 months straight. And then I had this journey of about 7 years of trying to get out of that. And whilst I was on this journey of recovery, I'd started to see through a lot of the practices and the tools and the methodologies that I'd learned, because they just didn't seem to be helping. They just seemed to be making me really busy and giving me a really long list of things to do. Most of which, as I was saying to Sarah about, I was really rubbish at doing them. So I started learning about things like yoga and seeing spiritual teachers, and I variously found myself occasionally connecting to this quiet space where I was just okay, and didn't really know what it was, but it was nice, given that I had this long list of stuff that I thought, needed fixing in my life. And then I was engaged in I started to do an apprenticeship with my former coach, a guy called Michael Neal. He'd been my coach in 2005, 2006, and I'd been learning about NLP and all sorts of stuff there. And then we kind of parted for a while, not for a bad reason, just because our coaching relationship ended. And then I reconnected with him around 2011, 2012, something like that, and started to hear him talking about these things called the three principles. Didn't really know what it was, and heard that it had been founded by a guy who used to be a Scottish welder turned philosopher. And I was like, that's interesting. But there was so much of what I was hearing that really resonated with me and really spoke of truth. And so I ended up, re-engaging with Michael and learning about these principles. And I did an apprenticeship with him in 2014. And a few things happened during that apprenticeship. I went into it still with a long list of stuff that I thought needed fixing. And I got to about halfway through this apprenticeship and just found myself more and more okay. Like, it wasn't that I didn't have a list of stuff that looked like it was broken. It's just that I didn't care and didn't think that I needed to do anything with that in order to be okay. And then a strange thing happened. I had a number of insights which led to a very quick recovery from the health issues that I'd had. I really started to understand what was at the heart of it all. And funnily enough, now work with people around health issues, and just finished the research study around chronic fatigue. So it was really funny. I kind of found a direction accidentally during that period. But actually, it was really funny because I found myself quiet during this apprenticeship. And then as I continued with it, I stopped feeling like I needed to control anything to be okay, which was really novel, having spent most of my life trying to control everything. So I found myself just not needing to control anything, whether it was my emotions. I found myself comfortable feeling whatever I was feeling. So no longer needing to change anxiety or fear or needing to be any other way than how I was. But I also found that because I suppose I wasn't trying to control things, but I also found that didn't mean that life didn't move. Right. So I actually wondered if I was going to stop getting out of bed at one point. So I was like, well, if I'm not putting pressure on myself, why would I get up? But that didn't happen. You know, apparently I still got up. Apparently I still looked after my kids. Apparently I still worked, but I just had a much easier experience of life. And I found that actually being in this settled place, this was the thing that really surprised me. Being in this settled place was not actually in opposition to doing well in life. It was actually the space where we are at one with this underlying creative intelligence that is just already living us. And actually, that creative intelligence builds galaxies, it unfolds universes. And here was me thinking, oh, well, that's my job. Well, I was always really bad at that. And now I kind of know why. It's like it was John against this intelligence that builds universes. That was never really going to end well. And so I found myself just settling down more into this space and then realizing that I kind of knew what to do moment to moment to moment. It was not that I had this grand plan. In fact, I used to live from this place of having this grand plan, but that kind of fell apart. And what was left was this gentle knowingness about what to do next. And what I found was that knowingness was in alignment to this energy. And actually there was energy around stuff being created from that place. So I distinctly remember, you know, getting 3/4 of the way through this apprenticeship and then one day realizing I had a coaching practice and not really knowing where it had come from. And I was sort of shocked because I was like, but this was not the result of me strategizing and planning but yet I have people, they're working with me and it was just a shock. And I just started to realize, oh, well, this is actually how life unfolds. And the more I realized that I don't need to unfold it to be okay, because I walk around with that okayness built into me. And the only thing that's ever going on is that I get lost in an illusion in my mind that creates this sense that I'm not okay. But when I realize that that's all it is, it's just an illusion, well, I get to settle down more into this space where I am more at one with life. And then this energy is able to work through me perfectly. Doesn't need me to work it. It's already working really well. And so that's really been my journey with this. It's been one of trying to control and shape and mold and not being very good at it and pretty much just making myself sick, to one of gradually seeing deeper truth about who we are and what this life is and how it works, to a point where I'm much more settled with it as it is. And as a result, as a byproduct of that, apparently, I seem to do much better, but not from a kind of ego, I'm making it happen, I'm pushing it kind of way, but rather that's actually when we're not trying to control it, there is something already at work. And it already kind of knows how to unfold our lives, doesn't really need our help or our support to do that. That's kind of the initial blur that's come out of me. I don't know if you've got questions about that or not.
That was wonderful to listen to, John. Thank you. Really,
You're welcome.
I could resonate with so much of that. I suppose one of the things that I hear from people, and it does happen to me occasionally, is this feeling of sort of impatience. So if we're not controlling it and we're allowing life to unfold, what about if it doesn't look like it's unfolding in a way that's going to help us pay the rent, or it's you know do you know where I'm going with that? Yeah. So it's like yeah, how long do you wait before you intervene? I mean, I know my answer is that I trust that I live in a loving universe, that this life is, that I am love, and that no harm can ever come to me. So the only harm that comes to me is what I sort of create in my own imagination of these possible outcomes of living on the streets, or not being able to buy food and stuff like that, which in reality wouldn't happen because I've got a strong support system with friends and family. But you know what I mean? You can kind of get caught up in dramatizing. But if I'm not controlling it, if I'm sitting back waiting, what happens if things aren't happening? Can you speak to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, one of the things that I've seen with this understanding is it doesn't absolve us from being in the human condition. We are living in the human condition, and within the human condition, stuff sometimes happens that we don't like. Sometimes we don't get to pay the rent. Sometimes hurricanes happen. Sometimes it doesn't look pretty to our experience. And the safety that we crave and we look for will never be found within the form of life, right? It is to be found in knowing more of what our nature is. And so for me, this conversation isn't just about sort of understanding what our feelings are or where they come from. It's about seeing deeper spiritual truth about who we are and what's actually happening in life. And for me, one of the descriptions that resonates with me is that, this life is one playing the game of two. It is this formless intelligence that is experiencing what it is like to be in infinite form. And it takes many different forms. And so, the safety we crave can't be found necessarily in looking to make the form of our life look a certain way, because stuff is going to happen that we don't like sometimes. The safety we crave is in being able to see actually more of our true nature, and being able to see that no matter what happens to us in life, that safety that we crave is always there, sometimes masked by the illusion of thought, but it is always there. It's kind of like, on a cloudy day, the sun is not missing. It's just there's a lot of cloud around. And so when we know that the clouds pass, that they change, that they, that they have a tendency all on their own to pass when we're not trying to do anything with them, actually we can see and reconnect back to that nature again. Now, what's that got to do with paying the mortgage? Well, actually quite a lot. Because if we know that no matter what happens to us in life, we literally walk around with the well-being that we're looking for within us, not outside of us, not because it's dependent upon the mortgage being paid or life going the way that we want. Well, we tend to walk around with a much clearer mind. And that much clearer mind is much more open to being able to see creativity, to being able to see opportunities that perhaps we might not have been able to see if we were so focused on trying to make life look the way that we thought it should. And I'll give you an example of that. Part of my journey was, I'd got to a point where I'd had this experience working as an IT consultant, and then I'd been very depressed during that period, and I thought that was because of my job. And so in my mind, I'd made up that I never wanted to go back to IT consultancy ever again. And so I'd been forever trying to build up a coaching practice and to earn a living from it, and had not been very successful at it, if I'm honest with you. And I remember one day speaking with my wife about it, and she just said to me, well, why don't you go back to IT work? And the thing that came out of my mind, out of my mouth at the time was, oh, I can't be happy doing IT work. Now, with the understanding of the principles that I had and of this innate well-being that was built into me, there was something about when I said that day that made it not make sense. And I was like, oh, hang on a minute. My well-being actually got nothing to do any of these things. And actually, it's probably very possible I could be happy doing this. Now I understand what I do. So in that moment, when I saw the possibility that actually I could be fine doing that, I then opened up to a new opportunity and seeing that right in front of me, there was an IT contract sitting literally on my lap that I had been brushing aside for literally months because of this made up idea that I couldn't be happy doing IT work. So of course I took it up, and I went and did this contract. And the irony is that it was whilst I was doing that contract that I started to get my first paid coaching clients. Now, I'm not saying that's a strategy that anybody would want to write down or try and copy. I'm just saying that, you know, you never know how life is going to unfold. But actually, the more you can start to see that this thing that we look for, and that I'd looked for okayness outside in my life, in my circumstances, and yet it wasn't there. And the more I found that it was built into me, that's what I mean, the more powerfully I get to show up to challenges in my life, because my mind is clearer, it's more creative, there's more space for me to see how to deal with things when they arise. And that's why I say it's not only the key to finding what we're looking for, it's actually hugely practical, this understanding, in a way that I had never found anything else that I looked at to be. Those things always seem to make me really busy. They always seem to keep me doing something, but I wasn't really getting results from them. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but
it certainly speaks to me,
yeah.
and I'm sure it speaks to other people as well. And it's great that you gave your own personal example as well. One that I have shared before is for myself is I had said to a friend that I really wanted more alone time, and also to start just focusing a bit more on my physical vehicle, this body I have. It's the only one I'm going to have as Sara J. Sanderson. I better, might as well look after it. And my friend told me about this karma yoga, where I clean a yoga studio in exchange for unlimited yoga. Now, in the past, my thinking would have been, well, I'm wanting to set up my coaching practice. I'm not a cleaner. How can I, I don't even clean my own house, as my husband will tell me. And when I mentioned to him, when I said to him, I'm going to do this karma yoga, I'm going to clean the yoga studio, he was just like, well, do they know that you don't clean? Anyway, so I put all thinking to one side about the logic of it, because it didn't make logical sense that I would take on this cleaning job. But what I found is, I've been doing it for a couple of months, and what I found is it does give me alone time. I've been re-listening to audiobooks and found them fascinating. Now that I've got this deeper understanding, I can actually understand what Eckhart Tolle was saying, what other spiritual teachers are saying. I'm like, oh. And also it transpires that the space which I'm cleaning, it's got this cafe area. I'm going to be able to host or facilitate conversations there, set up face-to-face groups. Loads and loads of opportunities for my coaching practice are there through this taking on this cleaning position. Who'd have thunk, eh?
That's what I mean. You just end up following these things that don't necessarily make sense. But what does our mind know? I mean, I mentioned that one of the things that I've done is I've done a research project recently working with people with CFS. And, when the idea first came to me to do that, I was not sitting there going, hey, this is a great way to build my practice and all of this sort of stuff. I was sitting there going, oh my God, the volume of work I'm going to have to do in order to do this that's going to have to be done in my spare time, etc., etc. You know, all of that happened, and yet I watched as I still did this thing and still did the study and still worked with the people, and you know, and of course, it's ended up being a huge part of my now paid coaching practice. But at the time, it just looked like a drag to my thinking. And I was like, oh my God, I'm really going to take this on? Apparently I did. You know, and that was the thing I found so interesting, is like, well, what does my thinking actually know about what I'm going to do? Half the time I was sitting there being annoyed at the fact I was doing this research project, but I was still sitting down and doing it. And it's like, well, yeah, apparently my mind doesn't know anything about what's going to happen. And, you know, the more I see that that's true, the more I tend to just follow these, I don't know, moment to moment sort of senses of knowing, and stuff like you described happens. And that's my experience too.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Since I have been able to get out of my own way and allow life to live through me, you know, like you said, being lived, it's incredible. And I was saying to you earlier, it's this effortless productivity. You know, so much is happening from me actually resting in being.
Right. What a relief, huh?
I know. It is mind-boggling, because the little mind can't comprehend it. It doesn't make logical sense. It's like, how can you be achieving more when you feel like you're doing less?
Yeah. Well, I mean, for me, it's just like, you know, if I know people sort of struggle with this idea of this intelligence and of mind, but actually we can observe it. We can see that it's working despite us. I mean, if you think about what goes on in your body on a day-to-day basis, you don't sit there and consciously digest your food or beat your heart or breathe your body or any of these things. They're just being done. The sun comes up every single day. A tree is grown by life. It's not sitting there, as far as I know, consciously thinking how it's going to grow itself. It's just being done. And we're not separate from that. We are a part of that intelligence. And that's why I say it's such a relief, because I was the antithesis of a human being. I was a human doing. I was constantly having to do something to try and be okay and to try and get life right. And I just didn't see that actually resting in my nature was not in opposition to doing well. It was actually the key to it. So I really resonate with what you're saying. It was a huge relief for me. It was like I suddenly dropped all of this stuff I've been carrying around for so long and realized, oh, thank God, it's not my job, because I'm really bad at it.
Yeah, I was pretty shit at it as well. To the point of, symptoms of depression and things like that, and not feeling like I could get out of bed. I wasn't good at the doing, but effortless productivity, I can do that.
Yeah. It's like you become a spectator, you know, as we were talking about before you clicked record on this. It's like, I don't know what's coming out of my mouth right now. You know, let's see. It's funny, I had some thinking about what might be shared. But what actually gets shared is what's going to be done. And my experience is that most of the time what comes out of me from that place is much more interesting and much better than anything that John could come up with. I guess your listeners are going to be the judge of that. We'll see.
I will let you know.
You'll let me know.
But yeah, just picking up on that, what I realise now is I could easily talk in front of an audience. Prior to this deeper understanding of the human experience, I would have lots of thinking around, well, I couldn't possibly do a public speech because I wouldn't know what to say. I'd have to, I don't want to be reading from my notes, but I wouldn't be confident enough to just speak. It would take too much effort. And now I'm just like, bring it on.
Yeah.
It'll be really, really fun experience. And maybe the first time I do it, it won't be as great as the 10th time or the 100th time I do it, because there's still a learning curve. There's a skill within just the whole, everything else that goes around public speaking. But the actual content, the actual stuff that comes out of me, if I'm resting in presence, and I know that it'll be worth sharing. And I can work on my posture and all the other bits and pieces that, projecting my voice and all the other stuff that goes around it. But the content, I don't have to worry about that bit.
And my sense with it is that sometimes what I have labeled as my most ineloquent talks have actually been the ones that impact people the most, because what I've seen is what impacts people is not so much how well I do it, or things like posture or that kind of thing, but it's whether people can actually resonate with the place that I'm sharing from and the feeling behind it. And it's amazing what people will forgive, when they sense you sharing from that place. And for me, that was one of the things that really, again, took the pressure off. So like you, I find myself saying yes to doing talks. Here I am doing one now. I've got another one coming up at the end of October in front of a group of about 70 people. And when I was asked to do that one, I just said yes. And then afterwards I was like, did I just say yes to that? And yet it was because I was just saying, well, look, the content is not up to me. I'm just going to be sharing what I know. And as long as I'm sharing what I know and I'm coming from the right place, well, you can't really get it wrong. Thank God. So it's another thing I'd have to worry about.
Yeah. Oh, I've heard lots of gems within what you've shared. Lots of things have resonated with me, and
I'm glad. Thank you.
I'm so excited about what am I most excited about? Well, it's you might have had this experience when you first come to this understanding, because this only happened in April for me, this deeper understanding. And I got the kind of sense that I could become all evangelical about it. But then I also know that that's not particularly helpful for other people. And what's happened instead is I've just allowed what I feel is a hub on Facebook at the moment, this kind of like this space where people can come and listen to more about this understanding and the truth behind it, listen for themselves. What are they hearing in this? I share different articles and videos, and now having these interviews with people like yourself, just so that people can hear different stories, and but also whilst listening to you, they're also listening from within and listening to their own wisdom, their own wisdom speaking through them, and that feels like the best way to go about this. Because yes, my husband said to me that when I first kind of was being a bit evangelical at home, because I feel I can do that at home, but he did say that you sound like a crazy person.
Oh dear. Well, that's his experience in the moment.
True. I do recognise that, but I kind of thought, but that could be a lot of people's experience in the moment. And if there's a kind of a way of not being the person in the street with the sandwich board, then I'll go for the less crazy option, which I feel is what I'm sharing with people. So it feels good.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose, one of the biggest things that has been part of my journey with this, and why I say yes to doing things like this now, is that I'm much more okay being visible than I used to be. But a part of that okay with being visible comes from the fact that I accept that sometimes what I share is not for everybody. And that's okay. That's not a problem. It's not that I'm right and they're wrong. I'm on my journey of exploration and waking up to seeing this, which looks like my way, but they're on their path and their way too. And a part of that might be at times they look at what I say and they go, well, that doesn't make sense to me, or that doesn't sound right. That's fine. That's a part of it. But I was not fine with that as a thing until until maybe a year or so ago. I actually thought, oh God, well, everybody has to agree with me and like what I'm saying before I'll actually share it. And I'm like, no, it doesn't work that way. Don't work that way. So I suppose another degree of resilience that I've seen is that I can be okay when people don't necessarily agree or like what I have to share. But as long as what I'm sharing is just sticking to what I know and my own experience, well, they might disagree with it, but they can't argue with it being my own experience. But they're more than entitled to not like it or not agree with it. So, I don't know if that's useful, but it's just another part of the journey that I've been on.
Yeah, it's very useful. And I've found that as well. A few months ago, if somebody was to disagree with me, I would take it so
I
personally.
know.
So personally. I mean, to the point of even the thought that someone might disagree with me would be enough to not be able to show up and be visible. I never would have been able to have a Facebook group and to do live streams that I do in it and have an interview with you. I just would not have been able to do it because of my own, because I would take everything so personally.
Yeah.
Because I was still in that that thought that there was something. It would confirm that there's something wrong with me. So
Right.
I was still in that place of there's something wrong with me.
Yes. So I've had that. So when someone says something to me now, it's not that I don't experience feeling, that kind of, what did they say and what does it mean? I still have that, but I also know that that's a transient thing. I also know that's not really information about what I've got to do. I just know, okay, I've got some thinking about what they're saying, so I'm going to feel that right now. But equally knowing, hey, I can get over that, and that's fine too.
Yeah, that's my experience. It just doesn't, things like that just don't stick around. Things that used to trigger me all the time it just doesn't happen. And I know that for my husband, he can sometimes, from his own experience, he experiences that as me not caring, which is certainly not the case. But I can see where he's coming from, because people sometimes like a reaction. They think that's the dance. People are so used
Why
to.
they're not reacting anymore?
Yeah. So it stumps them a little bit. It's like, huh? What? But I don't need to be right. I don't need to prove myself. And that's lovely. That's so lovely.
And it's actually that when you start to see that, that's when you actually start to do better. That, because so much of my journey was about trying to prove I was okay and enough, and that just makes your mind so busy. And yet when you see that that's not true, you already are okay. You just might have experiences of not feeling it from time to time. Oh, well, okay, I don't need to prove myself. Oh, look, there's all this space left in my mind now, and it's much more creative and productive. It's so practical.
Yeah, very practical. Okay, we're so over time. I did say that I would only keep you. No, it's not. I know it's me rabbiting on. I'm enjoying speaking with you, John. Is there something that just to finish on where you could kind of I don't know, it might just be one word, or it might be a sentence where you could just describe the difference from how you were living before this deeper understanding of the human experience and our true nature, to kind of post, you know, the old John without that understanding to the new John?
You know what's coming to mind? It's an old Zen saying, which is, and this is not to say I'm enlightened in any way, but it speaks to, you know, what I've started to see with it. So the Zen saying is, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. So if you were to look at my life, you'd still see that I was very human, right? So I still have my human moments. I still get lost in my head. I still, you know, but there's just this underlying knowingness and sense now that I am fine. And that the only thing that's going on is that occasionally I get lost and don't see that. So, you know, if it was one kind of sentence, it's that you're okay even when you think you're not. And that's all that's ever going on. And the more you can begin to see that that's true, the more this opens up for you. And you start to reconnect back to all the things that you look for and that you seek. That's not really one sentence, is it? But
it's a lot. Yeah.
It's what occurred to me. So,
and that's the beauty of it, isn't it? Is just going with what occurs to you, what makes sense, and it might not make sense, you know, in the next 5 minutes, in the next hour, but in this moment, that was the perfect way to end this interview. So, John, thank you so much. Really love speaking with you.
No, it's been a real pleasure to meet you, and thanks for having me on here.